Okay, so today what we are going to do is that to study the gender differences. Okay, actually we have quite a lot of material to cover, so what I'm going to do is that I will give you the essential ideas and then try to skip some of the details. Okay, now so yesterday we learned about what explains the gender differences in labor supply. So today what we are going to think is that what explains the gender differences in occupation and earnings. Okay, earnings we have seen that on average women earn less, right? Occupation, men and women, okay, some occupations are overrepresented by one gender, okay? So for example, if you go to like a department store, most of sales persons are women, it seems like, okay? And if you go to, let's say, construction site, then most of workers there are men. So there are some that kind of segregations in occupations as well. So we are going to think what explains those gender differences. Okay, first let's start with the human capital model. So what it means is basically that gender differences happens because women and men on average have different level of human capital. So what is human capital? Okay, let me explain. The human capital is basically the skills that individuals have that they bring to labor market. So when an employer hires an employee, okay, what they do is that in a way just to rent out the individual's human capital. Okay? So those who have high level of human capital are generally more productive, meaning that they give more to their employers. And those who have lower level of human capital gives less to their employers. So that can explain why the earnings different. For example, between university graduates and high school graduates. Okay? If you look at the wage distribution, then it is closely related with their education level. Okay? So you guys, like guys with university degrees, earn a lot more than, on average, the people with only high school diploma. Okay? So why that education makes earnings difference? Because education makes you more skilled in the sense that it gives you higher level of human capital, than human capital translates into your earnings or wages. Okay? So men and women may have different earnings, probably because they have different level of human capital on average. Okay? We are talking about the average difference. And they may have different occupations because they have a different type of human capital, okay? Or they make different choices. Now, if you look at the educational attainment by gender in 2010, then you can clearly, it's ages 25 to 59 in Korea, then you can clearly see that men are in general better educated. Okay? For example, university, males 30%, females 23%. You can see a big difference here. For example, vocational college, so above high school, then obviously men are more educated. Okay? So you can say that, okay, on average, males are paid more than females because males have higher level of education on average. Or you can say the higher level of human capital. Actually, there are two ways to accumulate human capital. One is the education, attend the schools. The other is actually a training. Okay, when you get a job, after you finish your education, you usually go through the training. Like you will learn some new skills provided by in the training provided by your employer, or you may choose to have a training sessions on your own expense. For example, some people actually go to learn, let's say, foreign languages even after they graduate. Then they believe that this learning foreign language will increase their level of human capital that will translate into higher earnings. Right? So those type of things actually happening. We call that investment in human capital. And so major aspect is education, so that's the difference. So actually you can see that, okay, males probably earn more because they are better educated. Actually, if you look at very young group, it's not much of a difference. Still, the university level is higher, so 47% and 43%. So, but actually, overall, the thing is that the women have higher degrees in this part. The reason is that at this age group, the men generally, since they go to military service, they generally are still at university. Okay, so difference is lower in younger groups, but in Korea we clearly see that there is a different level of education between men and women. Okay. So then the question is, then another question is why women are less educated than men? Okay, that's actually another question. Why are women less educated? Okay, so then we can learn from the model of human capital investment. So I'm not gonna go through the whole thing, but what we think of is that there are costs of education, okay, and then there are benefit of education. What is the benefit of education? It's basically higher earnings. Okay? At least there can be a better quality of jobs, but higher earnings. So what happens here is that it's an investment decision. So they compare the cost and benefit. Okay, so cost here is this is the monetary cost you pay. Z is the psychological cost. So going through university education, for example, psychologically stressful. E0 is that by attending university, you will lose your earnings opportunity. Right? If you are not here, you may work as in a place as just high school. Okay, as a person with only high school diploma. So E0 is the opportunity cost. So you give up. So this is the total cost. So present value of cost is meaning that since you attend university, for example, for 4 years, okay, and you add up these costs, you have to discount the future costs. Okay, so this is the present value of cost. So you can think of it as like how much money I pay in total to get university education, for example. And then what is the benefit? Benefit is basically the earnings differential. So if you have earned with only high school diploma, you will get E0. But with university degree, you will get E1. So that is the difference. That is the benefit you get from education. And then you will get the benefit for a long, long time, for example, 40 years, something like that. So you just add up all these numbers, but you have to discount them because it happens in the future. So you calculate cost and benefit, and it's simple. Get education if benefit, present value of benefit exceeds present value of cost. Okay? So an individual will choose to have more likely to choose to have education if they have higher benefit or lower cost. Okay? So if we apply this idea to men and women's differences, okay, then what is quite important, one thing is the benefit will depend on the earnings differential, but as well as depend on how long you're going to work. Okay? So let's say you are thinking that, okay, I may work for, let's say, after graduation, I may work for 30 years. Okay? Then getting on higher earnings is quite important. But let's say if you work for only 5 years, 10 years, then your benefit will be much smaller, because you will get the return from your education only for short period of time, right? So how long you're going to stay in the labor market is quite important thing that when you think of whether I should go to university or not. I mean, for example, if you think about it, let's say in extreme case, let's say you have no prospect of getting a job, okay? Then there is not much of reason to get, let's say, university education by paying all the costs, but you will get nothing in return, right? Then obviously people will be discouraged. I mean, there are people who will still go to university, but obviously consider, on average, people will be less likely to be educated. Okay? So if T, that duration of work is shorter, then people will get less education. Now, if you look at men and women, in general, especially in Korea, women are likely to have a shorter T, the duration of work, than men.
I understand, right? It's not worth it to invest in higher education because they have shorter amount of time due to birth, child not taken care of.
Yeah, that's the, yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of unfair.
Can not fair?
Yeah, like maybe.
Well, it may not be fair, but.
Taking some subsidies, giving some subsidies to.
Yeah, I mean, but given the situation, let's say you have no prospect of getting a job, or you will have a job only for a very short period of time after you graduate. No matter what the reason is, once you accept it, okay, then people are likely to have lower education. That's what I just said, right?
Yeah, I get it. Like you get a lower income because you have a lot worse education, makes sense. But I don't get it because what you say from like here, from saying from the beginning, okay, I'm not going to make an investment because it's not worth it.
Right.
I don't know, like, isn't that kind of hard to say? I'm not going to invest in my daughter because she's going to work less.
No,
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I know what you mean, but what we are arguing is not that whether let's say the women have shorter T is fair or not. Given that women have shorter T, they have an incentive to invest less. That's what I just said. Yeah.
It makes sense, yeah.
I mean, so that is basically so the individuals who have lower probability of employment or shorter duration are likely to invest less. Okay. So that is a reason why. One reason why the women have lower level of education. Okay, that's why. Okay, so do they have shorter T? Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you look at the LFPR diagram, then women drop out of labor force at around the age of 35. So when you look at, for example, these average years with the current employer, August 2015, then if you look at male and females, then males on average 6.5 years, females only 4.1. So on average, male have 2 years longer with their current employer. Actually, when they are young, there is not much of difference. Actually, women have a slightly longer tenure. We say it's a tenure. 35, 39, then you see the differences. But differences gets, a little not that big. But when you look at the 45, 49, then 4.6 years and 2.2 years. Okay. So dropping out of labor force in the middle. So if an individual foresee, okay, that, okay, I may drop out labor force, I am likely to drop out labor force at age 35, then these individuals will have lower incentive to invest in education. Okay. We are talking about an average. I'm not saying that everyone has that incentive, but on average, okay, these group will have lower level of education. Okay. So that's the basic, the theoretical prediction that this model makes. Okay. And another human capital investment is training. Okay, what is the training? Trainings, there are two types. One is general training, and the other is called specific training. So general training is the training that is useful to every employer. Okay, for example, you learn how to drive a car. Then that's a useful skill to any employer, right? And let's say you are a doctor, let's say you are a surgeon. You trained as a doctor in a hospital. Then, that's the skill that is useful to other hospitals as well, right? Because you will use basically the same skill in everywhere. Then those kind of training, we call that general training, okay? And there are specific training. Specific training is the skills, the training that gives you skills that are useful only to the current employer. For example, you learn how to drive a tank in an army. Okay, that is useful in the army, but when you get out of army, it's useless because you have no chance to drive a tank, right, in private, companies. So that is specific skill. Or let's say you learn how to use, let's say, customized system in a specific employer. Lots of companies, they have like their customized, let's say, information system that is used only within the company. Then you know that how to use it, but if you move your job, that's completely useless. You have to learn the new system from the beginning, right? So we can have those kind of two trainings. Actually, if you think about it, most of the trainings have these two aspects, at the same time, right? So, for example, you learn how to drive a tank. Some of the skills may be useful to, some of the skills may be general. No, it's, it's basically just driving a vehicle, so it's useful. But conceptually, so most of the training should have a mix of these two portions. Some are more specific, some are more general. But in our discussion, it's useful to divide them into two groups. Now, these two have interesting differences. Okay, basically the workers will get trained if the present value of the benefits exceeds the cost. Basically the same thing as an education. If you get a training, okay, sometimes you have to pay for the cost. Not every time, but sometimes you have to pay for the cost. Obviously you need to use your time, and also that during the training period, quite often, okay, you cannot work. Okay? So your pay will be lower. So those kind of costs, and also the benefit is obvious. Benefit is there. After training, your earnings will be higher because you have better skills. So comparing the cost and benefit will determine whether the workers will get education, will get training or not. Okay. So we talked about the education, but here actually we have the same problem for women. When you get training, right, to get higher return from training, you need to stay on the job for a long period of time, right? So you learn how to drive a tank. It's much more useful when you stay in the army for a long period of time. Let's say you will quit the army, let's say next year. Then learning how to drive a tank probably, it's not worth an investment. Okay, the same thing. Now, if you think of training, it is basically the same as education. Okay, so that's the. Okay, I'm not gonna go through this. If you're interested, you take my labor economics class. Okay, so that's the last one is the important part. Women are likely to be trained less than men since the duration of employment after training is likely to be short. So it's the same logic. Okay. So actually the women, there are two aspects. Women may choose to have less training, or employer may choose to give women lower training. Because from employer's point of view, it's the same thing. Quite often, employer pay at least a part of the cost of training, okay? Expecting that they get return from that training from their employees. Obviously, it's more useful if the employee stays with the company for a long time. Then it's more worth to give this person a training. if the person quits the job, let's say, in a few months, obviously that the employer, if they know that this person will quit the job quite soon, then this employer has lower incentive to give this person a training. So in both sides, women are likely to have lower training. Okay? So lower level of education and lower level of training, which means lower level of human capital. It means lower level of earnings. Okay? So that's the basic ideas. I mean, obviously, if women does not have that much of, let's say, women and men are on average likely to have, let's say, pretty similar duration of work, then you can see clearly that the investment in human capital will be much more similar. So their earnings will be much more similar. Okay? In other countries, we have seen. In Korea's case, then our labor supply of women it's likely to be much shorter than women in other countries. And at the same time, their level of pay is lower. Okay. So the implications are, there are some interesting implications. And so education and job training, so the women are likely to select occupations requiring less investment in education and on the job training because they have lower level of education or training. Okay. So women are likely to seek jobs where depreciation of earnings for time spent out of labor force is minimal, meaning that if the women believes that they will be out of labor force for some period of time, then during that period of time, their skills will be depreciated. Okay? If that depreciation doesn't matter much, okay, then that's the better choice for women. Okay, overall, what it means is, okay, the third part I will talk about. Overall, what it means is the women are likely to choose jobs that requires lower level of skills or investment. And it usually means lower paying jobs. Okay? So more simpler occupations. Okay, the last one is women's earnings profile is likely to be flatter than men's earnings profile. As they get older, usually individuals' earnings will change. How it will change? Basically, it depends on the level of human capital. So if the person accumulates more and more human capital over time, their earnings will go up steeply. But if the person does not invest much in human capital, then their level of human capital basically stays the same, so their earnings will be flat. Okay? Actually, if you look at the, so that's the idea. That since women invest less in training than men, even if they have the same level of education, females' earnings profile will be much flatter than males' earnings profile. Males' earnings profile will be steeper because men invest more and more human capital, so their skill level just increases over time. So this is like a theoretical prediction. If you look at the actual diagram, you can clearly see that. Okay, this shows the age earnings profile. What it means is basically simple. We have age groups and education groups. We just plot the average earnings of each group, like a 25, 29, less than high school, that this is the average monthly earnings. And then you just follow up for different age groups. Then as you can see, interesting, that generally it increases, except for this one, less than high school. Okay? University, actually, you can see that very steeply increases. Okay? And then drops a bit. Okay, so what it shows here is that in general, those who have better education have steeper increase in earnings. Okay. The reason is those who have higher level of education are generally have a tendency to invest more in training. So it increases Okay, and the vocational less and less. And less than high school, it's pretty much flat. So that's the thing. And then because of these differences in their increase of earnings, their differences in earnings actually will get much larger when they are older than when they are young. When they are young, they are actually not that different. But when they're old, you see, there's a huge difference across. So, for example, if you meet your friend, high school friend, let's say, who did not go to university, you and your friend will be much similar, will be quite similar. But in 20 years later, in 25 years later, it's likely your lives will be very different. Okay? So the difference gets actually larger and larger. This is men. If you look at Korean women, this is the diagram. Basically, it's flat. Okay? So there's not much of increase in earnings. It increases earnings up to, let's say, age 40. After that, it's pretty much flat. I mean, there is a little bit of increase, but if you look at men and women, you see a clear differences. When they are young, actually, if you look at these points, actually men and women is very similar, okay? But as time goes on, you can see that since women's earnings do not increase much, over time, their earnings difference get larger and larger, okay? So, so that is the one reason why the men and women have different levels of earnings. So it comes from their expected years of work is different. Okay. So expecting shorter duration of employment, women invest less in human capital than men. Okay? And women's work experience is shorter. So work experience is shorter usually means lower earnings. Okay? And then steeper, so men experience larger increase in earnings for additional years of training, of experience. So men gets the return from their investment, but women cannot. Okay, because they did not invest much. So that can explain why men and women. Okay, other factors. Other factors are that women tend to spend on housework. They may reduce the efforts. I mean, since the women tend to spend more time on household work, they may reduce their work effort because they are tired. And geographic location. So what it means is that compared to men, women tend to have limited set of choices when they determine their occupations. Obviously, it depends on the social situations. But let's say, women have lesser ability to determine the geographic location, meaning that women are more family-oriented, let's say. Okay? Assume women are more family-oriented. Then, men tend to choose jobs that wherever they want. Okay? But women tend to have jobs where their families are. Okay? That means that women generally have a limited set of choices than men. So that usually leads to, on average, that worse occupation. And the same idea basically here, that the women, they may try to have a job that flexible schedule or not much of business travel. So they tend to avoid jobs that you need to spend a lot of time out of your family. Okay? So then it basically means that your occupational choice is limited. Okay? So overall, that can explain many factors that contribute to.
Could free education minimize the differences?
Free education?
This would minimize the cost of.
Yeah, possible. No. Because if the education is very, let's say, it's not that expensive, then even if the benefit is lower, there will be more people getting the education. Okay. So that is the idea. So their choices of occupation are limited. Yeah. So another thing is that if women anticipate a shorter work life than men, they probably invest less in searching for a job. Okay? So if you expect work for only a short period of time, you don't want to spend too much time in finding work. So overall, that means that your jobs will be of lower quality, okay? Because you spend less time in searching. Okay, now, so far we talked about the human capital model. So human capital model, the theory goes something like this. Women expect lower return from investment in human capital for whatever reason, okay? We talked about, for example, shorter T, okay, the shorter duration of time. Given their investment, given their return is lower, women have lower incentive to invest in human capital. Also, as I said, that because of some other factors, women have probably find jobs, occupations with lower quality. So at the end, that translates into lower earnings for women compared to men. Okay, that's what we said. Okay, so in this model, we take that women's return to education or investment in human capital is lower as given. Okay. So given that is a situation that we can explain, what happens. But obviously, this model does not tell us why. In the first place, women tend to be less committed to market work than men. Okay? You said that women are more likely to be family oriented and that kind of stuff. Okay? Women tend to spend more time in doing household work. Okay? Then why? In the first place. Okay? So this model does not tell. This model tells nothing about it. Okay? So that's the limitation of the model. This model does not explain why that happened. Okay? Obviously, that for that part, for example, like another, like specialized socialization and those kind of things we talked about yesterday, they may contribute to the differences. And labor market discrimination also is a quite important factor. Because if the discrimination against women is severe in the labor market, women see lower prospect of getting a good job or getting a good pay, which means their return to education will be smaller because of the discrimination. So they are going to invest less in human capital. Okay? So, I mean, it's a fact that groups that are more discriminated are likely to have lower level of human capital. So that is a thing. So it may be a discrimination. Okay, so this model, the human capital model, basically takes the different level of earnings and different treatment of women in the labor market as given and then explain. Okay? So why they are in the first place treated differently is actually it's not in the model. So that explanation will be done by somebody else for example, sociologists and other people. So the women's earnings difference, which I said that it may be explained by human capital. Okay? So whatever the reason, women have lower level of human capital that makes earnings different. Okay? But is that everything? Okay? And actually when you look at the data, okay, that's not true. There are other factors. which means that even if the men and women have the same level of human capital, same level of skills and productivity, we quite often see that women are paid less. Okay? Why? That is the part that we're going to talk about, the discrimination. Okay? Now, so if you think of labor economics says that your earnings reflect your productivity. So it translates into something like this. Men and women, if they have the equal productivity, okay, you should see that their earnings should be same. I mean, in the extreme case, at least it shouldn't be that different. Okay? But still, quite often in labor market, okay, we see still they are different. Then why it happens? Okay? That is the one we're going to talk about in discrimination. Okay? Questions? Now, let's think of discrimination. Actually, the discrimination here, there are two types of discrimination. There is a taste discrimination, and later we have statistical discrimination. What is a taste discrimination? Taste discrimination simply means that this person discriminates against a group of people because this person doesn't like them. That's taste discrimination. Okay? So white employer discriminates against black employees because they don't like blacks. That's taste discrimination. Okay? And this employer does not hire women or pays less to women because this employer doesn't like women. Okay? That's taste discrimination. Okay? So then actually taste discrimination can happen in many areas. First thing we can think of, employer is discriminating. Actually, there may be a discrimination by employees or even by customers. Okay. First, let's look at the employer discrimination. Okay, employer discrimination. Let's assume there are two types of workers in the labor market, male and females. Okay. And let's assume that they are perfect substitutes in production. And markets are perfectly competitive. Meaning that they are basically the same. Their productivity, everything is the same. And so production function is since they are the same, basically, it depends on the total number of employees. It doesn't matter whether it's a male or female or it's a mix. It doesn't matter. Okay? So one male employee will produce exactly the same as one female employee. Okay? So that's the starting point. Okay? So value of marginal product of male and female workers is basically equal to, let's say, VMP. That's their productivity. Value of marginal product of labor for men and women are the same. Economic theory tells us, WF and WM, economic theory tells us that their wage should be the same. Why? If you pay different wages, okay, let's say the market pays, let's say, men higher, the higher pay for men than for females, okay, then obviously that no man will be employed, right? Because let's say men are paid higher than women, then with the same productivity, then no one hires men because they will hire only women. So male wage will fall. So at the end, they should be the same. Okay, that's the basic idea. But let's assume that the market does not work that way because of discrimination. Okay, that's what we are going to see. Now, if for the time being, let's assume that WF is lower than WM. That's the situation what I just said. Then the employer without non-discriminatory employer, so employer that does not discriminate, will hire only females, okay? And then they hire the number of females up to the point where WF equals BMPE. That's the profit maximizing condition. Okay. So it's going to look like something like this. Let's say given that WF is given this way, you have a VMP curve, and then optimal choice of employment is EF star. Okay? So in this economy, since men are paid more than females, non-discriminating employer should not hire any men. They will hire only women because women are cheaper but equally productive. Okay? Let's start with that situation. Now let's introduce taste discrimination here. Okay, how it works. Okay, it's a very simple way of thinking about it is if an employer is discriminating against women and when they hire women, okay, they get this utility. They become unhappy. Okay? So that unhappiness translates into this. Even if this person pays, let's say, $10 per hour to women, this person feels like it's likely to be he's paying more than $10 because of a psychological stress of seeing women around. Okay? So it's $10, but he feels like I'm paying 12, 15, something like that. Okay? I mean, obviously, that depends on this person's taste. This psychological cost will be higher or lower. We call that discrimination coefficient. Okay? So that we use D. So even if this person actually pays WF, okay, in monetary terms, this person pays $10. I mean, this person does not pay you $12, still paying $10, okay, in terms of money, but feels like paying $12. Or some people, they may feel like paying $15, depending on this person's taste. That's D. So WF times 1 plus D is the wage this person feels like paying. Okay? So, for this person, what's going to happen is that this person will compare not WF and WM. Actually, this person will compare WF times 1 plus D and WM. Okay? So if, let's say, women's wage is $10 and WM is, let's say, $12, okay? Then if D is, let's say, 0.3, then this person will feel like, even if this person actually paying $10, this person kind of, think that he's actually paying $13. In that case, this person will actually hire only men, right? Okay? And if, let's say, D is 0, then obviously this person will hire only females. Okay? So no discrimination, D is 0. If D is 0.1, still hires only females. Because let's say WF is 10, WM is 12. Right? D is 0.1, this person will still hire females. Okay? Even if this person discriminates against women, still hires only females because it's cheaper. Okay? Get that? Questions? So this discrimination coefficient tells us how discriminatory this person is. Okay, so think of this case first. Why is this case? In this case, D is high enough, so this employer hires only men. Okay, so as I said, let's say WF is actually 10, and WM is, let's say, actually 12, right? But they are equally productive. Okay? But if this person's D is, let's say, greater than 0.2 or equal, they'll hire only men and paying $12. Okay? So this is the situation. So they hire men and they will hire only EM star. Okay? Now, let's think about it. If this firm was not discriminating, this firm would be paying WF and hiring EF star. Okay? Obviously, you could compare the male, this firm and this firm. Who makes more profit? Who makes more profit? This company or this company? The company that hires only females should make more profit. I mean, it's stupid. They are exactly the same worker. You are just paying $2 more to your employees. Okay? That's not a good business decision, right? If they hired only females, they will hire paying $10. Now, this person is paying 12 to the exactly same work, right? And since they are paying $12, they will hire less. That means that this person will make much less profit than in the companies that pay WF and hire up to EF star. So pays too much and produces too little. Okay? So the profit will be lower. Now, think of the firms that hire only females. Okay, so if D is less than 0.2, they will hire only females. Okay, now, for the firm that hires only females, still there are differences in their discriminatory taste across the employers. Some are non-discriminatory. D is 0. Some have D equals 0.1. Some may have D equals 0.15, right? So different levels. So depending on their value of D, actually non-discriminatory firm will hire EF star, and discriminatory firms will hire EF0. This firm will hire EF1. Okay? In terms of their wages, paying the same. They pay, these three firms pays $10 each to their employees, right? Even if D is 0.1, this firm is not actually paying $11. They feel like they're paying $11, but they actually pay 10. So all these three firms pay $10. So no difference in the wage. However, there is a difference. What's the difference? How many female employees they hire. Okay? The individual who does not discriminate against women, this employer will hire up to the point EF star, which is the profit maximizing level of employment. Okay? Other firms actually hire less than the level of profit maximization. Right? Get it? So who makes the most profit among these three firms? Who makes the most profit? This firm should make the most profit because this is the profit maximizing choice. You are paying $10, but other firms are hiring too little, meaning that they produce too little. Okay? So, for these firms that have these very discriminatory, will pay too much, produce too little. Their profit will suffer. The other firms that hire only females, but still if this firm is discriminatory, they will produce too little. Their profit will be lower. So what does it mean? Actually, the conclusion of this model goes that discrimination does not pay. Actually, to satisfy this discriminatory taste, what happens is the employer actually sacrifices profit. Okay? That's their cost. So, that's what I just said. At the end, if all the firms have the same technology, competition in the market will be the employer discrimination. So over the long run, okay, the non-discriminatory firm will be the winner in the competition because they will make more and more profit compared to non-discriminatory forms. Okay, so at the end, this model predicts at the end competition will wither, okay, or will employer discrimination disappear. Okay, so more competition is the key, not the less competition, to make discrimination level go lower. Actually, if you think about it, if the market is non-discriminatory, then the firm makes a profit, right? And this firm actually can sacrifice some of the profits and still, keep discriminating against women. But if the market is very competitive, then it's much more difficult to do so. That's the basic. Now, so that's the first thing, that competition is important in determining the level of discrimination in the labor market. If the competition is very strong, the level of discrimination will be lower, and competition in the market is weak, then level of discrimination is likely to be high. Okay, and then if you look at the female-male wage ratio in the equilibrium, we have seen that in all countries, female-male wage ratio is always less than 1, meaning the females paid less than men on average. Okay. Why? I mean, if you think about the whole economy, then think of the employer that hires females. Okay. And let's assume that everyone is discriminatory against women, but their level of discrimination is different. Some have stronger discrimination, some have weaker discrimination. Okay, if everyone discriminates against women, what happens here is that if their pays are the same, if WF equals WM, okay, no one hires females. Okay, if everyone is discriminatory. Then if WF is lower than WM, let's say it falls. So compared to WM, WF gets smaller and smaller. Okay? And if that happens, and at some point, those who have weakest discriminatory taste will start hiring women. Okay? For example, like if this is, okay, forget about this. So if that ratio becomes smaller and smaller, and first, least discriminatory firm will hire women. Okay? And it falls more and more firms will hire women. So this is the demand curve for women. Okay? And then you have the supply curve. Okay? And then at the end, the equilibrium will be here. So it's less than 1. Okay. So obviously that if you think of what determines this in this economy, obviously how discriminatory the employers are will determine, for example, this WF and WM. Okay. So you can draw quite different diagrams, something like if the whole economy is very discriminatory, the equilibrium ratio will be this. But less discriminatory, for example, then the ratio will be higher. Okay? If it's non-discriminatory, something like that, then it should be here. Okay? So depending on the level of discrimination in the economy, you may have different levels, okay? Different ratios. So if discrimination explains everything in the earnings differential, Korea's discriminatory coefficient for employers may be very high, okay, if that's the case. Well, we talked about the employer discrimination, but it's possible that employees discriminate as well. So in this case, for example, that male workers do not like working with female co-workers. Okay? And using the discrimination coefficient, male workers feel like they are getting WM times 1 minus D if they work with females. Okay? If they work among themselves only with men, then this male employee feel like they are getting WM. But let's say they work with women, let's say they feel like WM times 1 minus D. So they feel like their wages are actually lower. Okay, if that's the case. Now, what's going to happen? Actually, if you are an employer and if you do not discriminate against women, what would you do? The solution is quite simple. You just do not hire men and women together. You put into different room. You put them into different room. Okay? It's a simple solution. Okay? Because since you don't discriminate against women and you know that your male employees will complain, there are two ways. You just fire everyone and hire only females. Okay? That's possible. Or you hire them together and you just put them into different rooms or different occupation, different departments. Okay? Whatever. Don't mix them. Okay, so that's the idea. So if WF is smaller than WM, no male workers will be hired. Now they are the same, and WF is cheaper. Their product is the same. Women are cheaper. Men complain. Okay, we fire everyone. We hire only females. Okay, then men will not complain because they have no job. Now, if WF is greater than WM, then no female workers will be hired simply because women are too expensive. And men will not complain because there will be no females. If they are the same, at the equilibrium, they're same, and the workplace will be segregated. That's what I just said. They just put them into different rooms, or one employer hires only females, another employer hires only males, and that's it. So in this case, we have actually quite a strong segregation in workplaces. Okay. So quite often, actually, the occupational segregation is explained using employee discrimination. It's true in some occupations. Okay, women are discriminated more by their male employees. Okay. I mean, that was much stronger in the past. Now it's much weaker. Okay. So that is the situation. Well, one possibility is that if the employer needs to put the female and male workers into same places, then they have to pay the premium to males, okay, to keep the male workers. Okay. So in general, employee discrimination will not lead to difference in wages, but in segregation of male and females. Actually, you can apply this same idea into, let's say, racial discrimination, white and black. Okay? If white workers discriminate against black workers, then what happens? They will be segregated. Some companies will hire only white, some companies will hire only blacks. Okay? So that's pretty much the same idea. Okay, the last one, wow. Customer discrimination. Okay, customer discrimination also happens. Okay? So in this case, this particular customer or the group of customers do not like dealing with women. or let's say in racial cases, do not like dealing with blacks. Okay? So in using the discrimination coefficient, you can say that, if this customer is serviced by women, by a female employee, they feel like they are paying more than what they are actually paying. So the price, they feel like price is P times 1 plus D. If it's male employees, then it's just P. Okay? So using the discrimination coefficient, you can actually efficiently write down this way. Okay? So they feel like P. So what happens here? Okay, I mean, if you think about it, it's pretty simple. If that's the case, female employees will have a hard time in getting the customers, right? Or let's say think of a salesperson. Let's say their customers do not like dealing with women, okay? So in that case, quite likely that women cannot sell much because they do not have customers. Or even if they sell it, they should sell it at a lower price, right? So from employer's point of view, female employees are simply less productive, right? Because they will have lower sales. So it will translate into lower pay for women. So customer discrimination can lead to different level of pays. Okay? Those preferred groups, preferred employees will generally have higher productivity than their counterpart in women. That's one possibility. But there is actually another solution. The another solution is if the employer knows that their customers do not like dealing with women, what they can do, they can just simply separate men and women into two groups. Okay? Those who deal with customers, you hire males. Those who do not have to deal with customers, you hire females. Okay? So the females do not have direct contact with their customers. Okay? So it can lead to different wages or different occupations. Okay? Okay, so occupational segregation. For example, if you go to, let's say, it's a well-known story in the restaurants in the U.S., for example. So expensive restaurant, most of servers, waiters and waitresses are whites. Into the kitchen, you see blacks and Mexicans working there. Why do they put blacks and Mexicans in there? Because their customers, on average, have problem dealing with those, racial groups. Okay? So that can explain why, there is occupational segregation, for example. So that is the case. So the discrimination actually can explain quite convincingly why men and women are paid different, okay? even if their productivity is the same. Okay? It's simply because, for example, on average, women are discriminated against by their employers, so they are paid less. Or discriminated against by the customers, so they are paid less. And why they tend to work in different jobs? Okay, probably because it's a discrimination. Okay, the employee discrimination leads to segregation in their workplaces, in occupations. Customer discrimination, may lead to, differences in their occupation. I just said only the female discrimination against females, but actually, in some cases, you can think of discrimination against males. Okay, why you don't see, men in some occupation? Probably the men are discriminated against in such occupations. Possible. Okay. Okay. Statistical discrimination. Okay, that's something. Okay, let me just give you the gist of statistical discrimination. So far, when we discussed that men and women are treated differently, even if their productivity is the same, because the employer or employee or customers have such taste. They just simply don't like them. But even if we don't have such a taste, the discrimination, still the discrimination-like situations can arise in some cases. What case? Okay, for example, let's say that employer does not have a perfect information about their employees. They have, let's say, male employees and female employees. But they don't have perfect information about these two groups. Okay? Sometimes they have to make a decision on what to do with these employees, and sometimes they may use group characteristics, okay, to determine what to do. For example, as I said, that employer likes to give training to long-term employees. So let's say there are two candidates, one male and one female, and you're trying to make a decision who should get the training opportunity. What you want is the one who has committed long-term commitment to your company. But you are not sure actually who are actually committed, more committed. Then what you can do, you can try many things, but one possibility is that you think of on average, for example, men have longer tenure in work than women. So you just assume that, okay, since this employee is a female, she is more likely to quit this job sooner than these male employees. So you give, let's say, a training opportunity to male employees. Not because this employer has a discriminatory taste against women, but because this employee uses group characteristics to determine what to do with the individual workers. Okay. That we call it statistical discrimination. So they use like a statistical information to discriminate. Okay. So it's not clearly like taste discrimination, but at the end the results may be still the same. Okay. And from employee's point of view, you don't know what's going on in this person's mind. Okay. You feel like you are discriminated against. But the reason is different. It's not taste. It's a statistical discrimination. And then, there's an interesting. Okay, so the feedback effect is something like so when they use the group characteristics, okay, what happens is that, let's say, think of that example I just said. And then, actually this female employee was actually quite committed to this company. But at the end, the employee did not get the opportunity. So the female employee got really disappointed, obviously. And so she quit the job. Okay? What would the employer think? Wow, I was right. Okay? So this is the feedback loop. So in the second time that this employer makes a decision again, this employer will have actually even stronger belief and make that decision. And then also, so that is the feedback loop that we are talking about. Okay? So it is possible that so female workers may respond by exhibiting exactly the unstable behavior the employee expects. This reinforces the employer's belief, and this just persists. Okay, so the statistical discrimination is very difficult to make it go away. Okay. Yeah, so statistical discrimination is actually quite often, quite common than you think. Insurance market is just full of statistical discrimination. How do they determine that how much they charge to your car insurance, driving insurance. It's simple. I mean, they don't know your individual driving skills and everything. What they do is just apply group characteristics. If you're young, unmarried, you have short, you drove, let's say, your driving history is short, okay, you must be very dangerous. Okay? We'll charge you more. They don't care what your individual characteristics is. I mean, they care less. I mean, later when you have longer and longer history, that matters more. But anyway, so the insurance companies uses statistical discrimination all the time. Okay, so labor market, we talked about statistical discrimination, but also it's quite common in insurance market as well. So in short, earnings differential between men and women categorized into broadly two groups, two reasons. One is human capital. The other is discrimination. Okay. So obviously that if, depending on which one is greater part, actually the social policy will be different. If, let's say, human capital is the let's say, most reasons why the earnings differential exists, then you should do something to correct this problem. That human, I mean, as you suggested, like you just, give more education opportunities to men and women, or women actually, disadvantaged groups, okay, something like that. If it's a discrimination, you should try something else. For example, probably you have a law that strongly enforces like equal pay for like equal work, that kind of thing, okay? Or you may have a quota, for example. So depending on which part is the main reason for earnings differential, what to do about it will be different, okay? So the measuring what is the main reason is a quite important task. Okay, I'm not gonna just, okay, it's too much of time. There is a way of doing it. In the standard way of doing it in economics is to use the Oaxaca decomposition. So, okay, I think we stop here and then, there's a way of doing it, okay, so.